talk about these questions for just a few minutes. Overall, did the dynamics of the negotiations emphasize self-interested behavior or cooperative behavior? And whichever answer you think that is, why do you think it evolved that way? And then also talk about, do you think that what you observed in terms of that kind of dynamic of self-interested versus cooperative, do you think that's realistic? Is that what's going on in the real negotiations? Or do you think this was, somehow a bit artificial and something else is going on? So take a few minutes to talk about those questions, and then I'm going to ask a few of you to just kind of give a couple of highlights from your discussion to share with the whole group.
But there was a slight edge of cooperation maybe.
We did choose that. That's true.
Because we're on very, very different grounds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think we probably have issues with that.
Right. It's hard for a small little country that has nothing.
Being in the bloc instead of working as individual countries. And I think the example of deforestation, how, if all of the rapidly developing countries agree on, decreasing deforestation, then Brazil is giving up much more than South Africa. So is that really a fair negotiation?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so different interests within a bloc. Okay. Anything else from this group?
Sort of just the general lack of information that we started with. The value of $1 even, how far that money will go, and to what ends.
It's like, what is the difference between $200 billion and $800 billion? It's unfathomable. Yeah.
For the most part, it was self-interested. I think we could all agree, but there was a lot of cooperation, obviously, with the bloc mentality instead of the country. I mean, we weren't all actual delegates from our countries. We didn't know everything about our country, so we had to work as a bloc. So that helps for cooperation, and that helps spread out to the other blocks.
Helps for cooperation.
Yeah, right.
Interesting thesis. Okay, it might be true. Okay, all right. So there was cooperation within blocks, mostly self-interested behavior in terms of how the blocks interacted with others.
Yeah, it would have been a lot harder to get to as central or cooperative, I think, as we did, because we started out so very far, and in actuality, that those very far differences are real. Like, you know what I mean? The less developed countries, we started off at 70% reduction, and now we're at 40, and I don't think as big a convergence would have actually happened in real life. I think it's a lot harder to come to those, because we all wanted to cooperate, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was a lot easier for us to say, yeah, halfway in the middle is fine.
Are any of you surprised at how quickly you went from, you probably thought that, oh, you're all going to come in here being really cooperative. Maybe I'm wrong in this assumption, but my assumption is that you probably came into this in the beginning thinking, oh, we're going to cooperate together and we're going to find a solution that will really do a lot to prevent climate change. And then we're a little horrified to find how quickly you started behaving in a very different way. Is that at all what was going on in your minds, or do I have is my mental model of your thoughts wrong? Okay. So maybe if you had come in here with more knowledge about a particular country was going to represent it, you might have been even more hardened in your positions. Okay.
One thing that they all kind of brought to my attention that I didn't really think about. The fact that within our blocks, like you guys were saying, that we wouldn't have as much agreement, but I didn't even really think about the fact that a lot of huge oil countries were in the other developing country blocks and a lot of the OPEC nations, and so our saying that we will do 25% increase would be extremely unrealistic, because the OPEC nations, for the most part, would probably have the most say in what we were going to present as our block point of view, which then would probably be 100%. So I just think that the realisticness of, I mean, again, going back to the fact that we were naive about our positions, but
yeah, which is part of why these blocks don't really hold together very well, where they collect a set of interests that really can diverge a great deal. I deliberately did not make anybody here a representative of Saudi Arabia, because I just thought that would just add more dissonance than we could deal with in 3 hours. Was the outcome that we ended up with, was it good or bad?
I mean, in terms of what though? In terms of the climate? No, it was awful.
Okay, in terms of climate, it was awful. Okay, so what defines a good outcome or bad outcome?
I think for the rapidly developing countries, I think we kind of, I don't want to say we got shafted too, because we had to stop deforestation. We had made huge commitments for not
I
much.
thought that the simulation was good in terms of what it would be like versus reality. Because I feel like in reality, like what we achieved in terms of climate change, even though it wasn't what we aimed for, it was so much better than it would have been in real life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you think that this group did better than what the real meeting in Panama is likely to come up with in the following one in Durban? Yes.
Well, from the point of view of our block, a good outcome would be one in which we're not destroyed by climate change through sea level rise or whatever. And according to the simulation, we'd still be rising above that 2-degree mark, and therefore we're still screwed. So, although it's the developed countries and the rapidly developed countries gave us a lot, it's not enough for us.
Mm-hmm.
So was it a good outcome? I mean, they did give, but we're still a mess.
Yeah. Okay. Any others reactions to these questions? So what do you think are the prospects for getting a good outcome in the real negotiations? I think it's what we look forward to. Okay, Sam's very pessimistic. Elena?
I think that like every year, I mean obviously it's not going to do like enough of the change we want to see in like a human lifetime, but every year they're going to get kind of closer and closer to like what we accomplished maybe in 3 hours and ultimately had to be told to like accept. But I don't, yeah, I have to agree ultimately they're kind of like in a time frame that we're given, I think they're bad.
Yeah. So the meeting of that ad hoc working group that we were sort of simulating, which is a one meeting, that's a 7-day meeting, and then the annual conference of the parties is 2 weeks, and it's exhausting. It's really exhausting. And they go, so as we were not able to come to an agreement at the end of this, typically what happens is the last day of the real negotiations where they're coming up to, it's supposed to close at 6 p.m. on a Friday, and they extend it later into the evening, and they, I think in Copenhagen, I think they finished at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. of Saturday morning. What do you think could be done in the real negotiations to give us a bit more hope for something worthwhile to come out of it?
I was going to say, like, instead of putting aside self-interest, realizing that self-interest ultimately are all the same. We're all like we were talking about the graphs today, how even if we all stopped polluting right now, everything, we would still be hitting ridiculously huge parts per million in the atmosphere. So I guess, yeah, we're all like going down slowly, and we need to just like realize that.
So a more informed sense of self-interest, figuring out how can you structure these agreements where you take into account the different responsibilities and capabilities of these countries, very complex, but trying to figure out a way to structure an agreement so that it is in the self-interest of each country, because this is a voluntary process. Okay, no country is going to be held to reducing their emissions by some world government that holds a club over their head and says we're going to punish you if you don't do this. So the agreements have to be ones in which all the major parties, all those countries that are large sources of greenhouse gas emissions, we need to figure out a way where they decide that it's in our self-interest to reduce our emissions, and we will hold ourselves to that, not because of threats from others, but because we find it advantageous to do so. In part because of what other countries are promising to do. Side payments for greater assistance, help with technology transfer, a variety of things. Our focus here, because of this being structured as this UN-style negotiation, is focusing on nation states and what nation states can do collectively on this. And there's a whole lot of other actors that are involved in this. And so the best example is to look at during a period where the US had decided we were not going to be part of the Kyoto Protocol, that we weren't doing anything really in the international arena about making commitments to reduce our emissions. But we had the state of California, other states putting together policies to reduce their emissions. lots of other non-governmental activities going on. For example, there's a little flyer out on the table about Dickinson's Climate Action Plan. So we're amongst a group of about 700-800 colleges and universities that have all pledged to reduce their emissions and eventually become climate neutral by doing things to offset our emissions. So one avenue by which something good can happen is by encouraging greater action and being involved in greater action in these civil society things, non-governmental things, encouraging things to happen at local government level, state government level, and maybe that then changes things at national levels, and maybe that eventually changes the international end of things. Part of what I think we're going to see in Durban, which is a change from Copenhagen, is in Copenhagen, people, I think, went into that with expectations that just could not possibly be met. Of negotiating a complete comprehensive agreement that would replace the Kyoto Protocol, that would cover all aspects. We're focusing on just a small sliver of the issues being negotiated, okay? And so in Copenhagen, they're trying to come up with this mega proposal or agreement and just couldn't get there. Part of the reason why they want to tie these all together is, as you were doing in your discussions, is you want to tie issues together so that if you give on this one, you're asking for something in return on another one, okay? If you now make those part of separate activities, you're less able to do that. But it looks like there's some movement in that direction to think about, can we carve out pieces of this problem and focus on coming to an agreement on one piece at a time. And so I think we'll see at Durban, possibly on deforestation issues, looks like something where they might make some good progress. I'm not sure where else they might make